Thank you. Mr. Sanders.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Greenspan, I have 4 brief questions that I appreciate you responding to. 30% of American workers earn poverty or near poverty wages. In fact, low-wage workers in the United States are now the lowest paid low-wage workers in the industrialized world. The minimum wage, as you know, is now $5.15 an hour. If it had kept pace with inflation from 1968, it would now be $7.33 an hour. Many of us believe that it's important to protect low-wage workers and to raise the minimum wage so that nobody in this country who works 40 hours a week lives in poverty. Could you make a recommendation to Congress? In your judgment, should the minimum wage be raised?
I do not. The reason I do not, strangely enough, Congressman, starts off with the same premise that you did, namely that I, too, am chagrined about the extent of dispersion of incomes in this country. And as I've said many times publicly, you cannot have an effective society unless you have the assent of all parties in it that the system is fair. And my concern about the minimum wage is it does not do what you suggest it does.
I would respectfully suggest the evidence.
Well, I understand that. I'll give you my reason.
And I have 3 other questions. So you don't surprise me by telling me that you're against raising the minimum wage. Let me ask you the second question, and you can elaborate. And I apologize. We just don't have a whole lot of time. As you know, and I think agree with, the United States has the most unfair distribution of wealth and income in the industrialized world, with the richest 1% owning 40% of our wealth, more than the bottom 95%. Meanwhile, 20% of our children live in poverty. We have millions of people who are experiencing hunger. We have some homelessness. People can't afford health insurance, can't afford to send their kids to college. Could you briefly tell us what policies you would recommend to Congress to do away with or ease this disparity of wealth that we are currently experiencing?
Let me start, Congressman, by saying what I would not suggest. And what I would not suggest is means which would somehow obliterate the wealth of those who are in the upper income groups or upper asset groups, because there's no evidence to suggest at all that if you were to take the top 20, 50, 100, 500 people and essentially eliminate all the wealth that they had, that would improve the standard of living of anybody. So merely obliterating wealth or merely confiscating wealth strikes me as a wholly inappropriate policy if the purpose is to achieve higher standards of living.
But I think nobody is talking about obliterating or confiscating wealth. We're talking about fairness and the appropriateness of one person having $80 billion in personal wealth while children go hungry. My third question, Mr. Greenspan, is are you concerned? I know that you played an active role as chair of the Fed Reserve in orchestrating a bailout of the $5 billion hedge fund known as long-term capital. And you came before our committee, and what you had to say was very interesting. Are you concerned about such mergers as Travelers Insurance and Citicorp when they form a company with assets of almost $700 billion, 140 times as large as long-term capital? What happens if they fail? Who in God's name is going to bail them out? Are you concerned about that?
First of all, let me just say that we don't consider that bringing in private investors into the long-term capital management problem was a bailout. It was their money, their interest, and all we did was to offer them an office space to come around.
But you were concerned. That you were very concerned about the implications of failure.
Indeed, I certainly was.
If you're concerned about that failure, what about a failure of a company which is...
We would be concerned about a failure of any large institution. But let me suggest further. We do not believe that in the event that it turns out that a substantial institution fails, that they should be bailed out. In effect, what we may conclude for purposes of stabilizing the system, that an orderly liquidation of an institution is far superior to letting it crash with all of the implications that would occur. That would mean, of course, that all equity owners are out. It would mean that perhaps some debt venture owners alike would have losses. Our notion would not be the question of perceiving that an institution is too big to fail and that therefore gets government support.
Mr. Green, I apologize again. Let me ask you my last question, and I don't mean to be rude here, but...
Excuse me, Mr. Sanders. This last question will have to be answered in writing.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Greenspan, in your own Federal Reserve report, results from the 1998 survey of consumer finances, which you guys publish, and you look on page 5 in the statistics of before-tax mean family income, what it shows is that for all families earning less than $100,000 a year, in fact, the mean family income went down between 95 and 98. That's page 5. The people earning over $100,000 a year went up. Given that reality, I don't know how we keep talking about a booming economy if only the people on the top are doing quite so well.
Well, I hate to trash some of the data that we collect, but this is a sample mean, and we've got far superior data for the aggregate of the mean.
You're criticizing your own data that comes out in your own report.
The problem basically is that these are sample statistics. Sometimes you find that if the purpose of this is the distribution, which it is. I mean, I agree with your conclusion about the distribution. I just wanted to point out that the actual real median family income between 1995 and 1998 actually went up.
For everybody, but not for people on $100,000 a year or less.
All I would say to you is I think our data are accurate in a relative sense, and the conclusion you draw I don't find objection to. I just wanted to raise the issue.
Okay, I'm using your statistics, sir.
Okay. Time of the gentleman has expired. Mr. Castle.
Thank you, Chairman Leach. Chairman